Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Fran and today we'll be talking about the links between the law of attraction and quantum physics. If you're skeptical about the law of attraction, then you've come to the right place. And if you're watching this video, it's no coincidence. Nothing in life is. So stay tuned. There is a message for you in this video. You've come to the right place because I too was skeptical. I came from a scientific education, having an honours degree in psychology, and having graduated in the UK, I have a very pragmatic approach to psychology, one based on rigorous experiment and objective observation. Objective in brackets, as I'll explain later. After my degree, I got a diploma in cognitive behavioral hypnotherapy and then took several counselling courses. I've also been practicing yoga and meditation for many years. Too many to mention or to count. But the main thing I learned from all these courses and education was that any theory is valid as long as you believe in it. My technique or any technique is efficient as long as it's widely accepted and recognized. What is deemed objective is usually our current understanding of a matter. I studied all these theories. They were sold to me as objective, but I couldn't buy into them completely. To me, they were only a commonly accepted point of view. Science didn't seem so scientific. Then one day I was in a bookstore in New York and I stumbled upon one of the many Einstein's biographies available out there. And I don't even like reading biographies, but I was drawn to that book. The cover was the usual picture of a disheveled scientist sticking his tongue out to mock the scientific establishment. I thought that the book would be about his personal life, but it was mostly about the theory of relativity. I understood very little of it, and I was shocked by the fact that the new theory of gravity had been discovered in 1905 or found in 1905, and in schools they still teach children Newton's law of gravity, which we now know is a gross approximation of reality and the laws of motion, and which breaks down at the subatomic level. Furthermore, Newton's gravity included no local action, or as Einstein defined it, spooky action at distance. However, Newton didn't have a scientific explanation for it. In any case, Einstein found a new theory of gravity, relativity, but in order to do so, he discovered that time and space were not absolute. He found out that time and space vary according to the observer, but each observer is right according to his or her own frame of reference. He also discovered that space and time are not distinct, but intertwined. In other words, we live in a four-dimensional space-time reality, and he found that gravity is not a force which acts at a distance to attract mass, but rather it's the warping of a space-time fabric caused by mass. I was so fascinated by this theory that I kept reading on. I couldn't stop. Einstein then discovered that information can only travel as fast as the speed of light, which is something like 300,000 kilometers per second or something to that effect. But that's the speed limit for information to travel anywhere in the universe or in the non-universe. And he also found that at the speed of light, time is frozen. In other words, the faster the observer moves, the slower time time rolls on. Furthermore, he discovered that time moves faster in space or away from mass and slower closer to the ground or close to Earth. The difference is minimal, but today it can actually be confirmed through the use of high precision atomic clocks. Einstein achieved this insight by a mere thought experiment. This is probably why he was quoted as saying that imagination is more important than knowledge. You see, imagination is limitless and can carry us into unexplored territory, while knowledge is limited and partial, and sometimes even blatantly wrong, as in the case of a flat earth paradigm, which people believed for centuries. In actual fact, all knowledge is right until proven wrong by brave acts of imagination. But to go back to Einstein, he was then fascinated by light. And by studying the photoelectric effect, the radiation of hot bodies, he found that light of a certain frequency could displace an electron from a metal bar. It wasn't the intensity of the light, but its frequency. In other words, light at a certain frequency could affect matter. Up until then, light was thought to be a wave, pretty much like sound. The photoelectric effect showed the particle nature of light. A particle of light was then called quanta of light. Quantum of light. Hence the definition of quantum physics, today known as photon. Einstein unwittingly then gave birth to the modern quantum mechanics, which he then spent his entire life fighting against. Why did he fight against quantum mechanics? Because quantum physics proved that spooky action at a distance was indeed real. And at the subatomic level, particles could communicate instantly, even at incredible distances when entangled. And those particles would change their behavior when being observed. Let me repeat that. Those particles were changing their behavior upon being observed. And if they were entangled or linked in a certain way prior to beginning the experiment, those photons or even electrons, as we later found out, by observing one of the particles, you could collapse the state of the other particle. So light was then discovered to have a dual nature of particle and wave. And what turned the wave into particle was the act of observation. What is called in science, in quantum physics, the observer effect or the observer problem. This was shown unequivocally in Young's famous double slit experiment. I won't go into the technical aspects of it, but if you're interested, please comment below and I will dedicate a new video to it. In any case, the dual nature of light and the fact that such nature is decided by observation forces us to question the very nature of reality. If subatomic particles exist as a quantum wave of probability until observed, and only upon being observed they collapse into a definite state, which we call reality, then objective reality itself doesn't exist until observed. In other words, consciousness observes possibilities into actualities. Before observation, all that we have is a quantum wave function of probabilities, all existing at once in some virtual realm in which Time and space do not exist. To rephrase these in terms of the law of attraction, in order to manifest things in our 3D world, all we need to do is to observe them as if they were real. Take a second or two now to digest this information. If it challenges your logical mind, it should, because it turns everything we know about the world on its head. Cause and effect are reversed. Our deterministic view of the universe collapses. We can't predict the future, not because of our ignorance, but because it doesn't exist. If not as a virtual cloud of probabilities in some higher dimensional quantum field. This brings us straight to the famous Plato's cave allegory, in which people inside a cave see shadows reflected on the wall of the cave from the outside world and assume that those shadows are the real thing. The only way that they can realize that they are looking at an illusion is by leaving the cave. In the example of the cave, in the example of the cave represents our 3D world, which we interpret as real, but which, according to some of the latest quantum physics theories, is but a hologram of the real thing. And just like a hologram, by changing the point of view, you can change the whole picture. There isn't one image that is more real than the other. They are both real to each observer in a different position. And each observer can access both aspects or images simply by changing perspective. Now, in many interpretations of quantum physics, there are just two but infinite possible parallel realities. For example, the many world interpretations. And these realities we can collapse into definite observable fact simply by observing them. As they say, where attention goes, energy flows. And just as a wave collapses into a particle upon detection in the double slit experiment, so does reality collapses into a definite state upon observation or imagination or focused attention. Now, there remains an aspect of quantum physics which is not consistent with the law of attraction. While in quantum physics there is an element of randomness, as subatomic particles are observed to go through each slit in the famous Young's experiment with a 50-50 chance upon observation. In other words, when you observe the particles going through the slits, they behave as particles or they collapse into a particle, and they go through each slit with a 50-50 chance. The proponents of the law of attraction state that you can actually collapse reality into a chosen state. Therefore, in Young's example, you can send those particles through a specific slit at will, just by using focused attention and belief. Now, according to Neville Goddard, a spiritual teacher from the 1940s, you can manifest the reality simply by assuming the state of mind of the wish fulfilled. In other words, as if your mind were traveling to the future that you want to manifest and believe it to be real, as if it had already manifested in our 3D reality. Although quantum physics hasn't established that you can willingly observe particles to go through a specific slit, the famous BEM experiment shows retrocausation effects. In a statistically significant way. In other words, participants in the experiment are found to affect the outcome of what they observe through information given to them after the observation has taken place. Now, this is quite difficult to digest, so I'll try and rephrase it. Basically, in this experiment, participants were asked to imagine what some pictures that they were presented with. They had to focus their attention what type of picture would come up. We were given some options, and they were thought to imagine which of them would come up on the screen. And basically, after the experiment, they were given information about the type of picture that would come up, and that information was found to be relevant to how they replied during the experiment. And I know it's challenging to understand because we're talking about retrocausation. Those participants who, after the experiment, were given the information about the experiment did better at guessing than those who weren't given the information. And obviously, the results weren't checked until after they were given the information. But there are other experiments like these, which prove that at the quantum level, time doesn't quite behave like it does in our 3D world. And this is, in fact, this is consistent with quantum physics findings, in which subatomic particles have been found to travel in both directions of time. In other words, at the fundamental level, there is no arrow of time. There is no distinction between past and future. There's no distinction between cause and effect. Now let that sink in. So distinction between cause and effect becomes blurred. And so our question is reality objective and we just observe it? Or is reality an illusion and the observing consciousness is the only real thing, as in Plato's cave? In other words, do we live in Plato's cave? Are we asleep, unconsciously dreaming up an illusory reality? Quantum physics and now the proponents of the law of attraction suggest that this is indeed the case. Can we become lucid dreamers and start dreaming up a reality of our choice? This option is gathering more and more pace as the holographic interpretation of quantum mechanics is taking the scientific community by storm. Now, how much choice do we actually have in what we observe into reality? That is the real question. The double slit experiment suggests that the nature of the quantum particle is truly random, going through each slit with a 50-50 chance. However, in the double slit experiment, the observer was represented by a Geiger counter, in other words, a counting machine for subatomic particles. But what happens when the observer is a conscious individual with expectations, beliefs, and preconceptions? According to Bem and colleagues, the direction of the outcome is strongly influenced by the expectations of the observer, by the knowledge of the observer. Now, if you find all this mind-boggling and utterly confusing, you're in good company. This is because these concepts challenge our ingrained belief of what reality is and how it works. It challenges everything we have learned in school. It challenges our common sense and the limited preconceptions of our five senses. If you are skeptical, then you're my kind of audience. I need skeptical people to put this theory to the test in their everyday life. So don't take any of this for granted, nor discard it offhand because unlikely or improbable. I invite you to become scientists in your own lives. Carry out your own experiments. Intend for something in your life. Practice the state of mind of the wish fulfilled and wait. Then please comment below with the results of your experiment. I only have one request of you, that you approach this experiment with an open mind and with curiosity, and that you suspend all disbelief while you intend for your desired outcome, that you have utter faith, and then what you intend for is already yours. So you have to believe, suspend all doubts, and just believe that what you intend for, your desire, is already being achieved. It doesn't matter how big or small your intention is, but I'll advise you to start small, as what we perceive as small is less challenging for our rational minds and is easier to accept by our unconscious minds. And remember, we need to believe that we have already achieved it. And how can you believe that you have achieved something if you think that it's too big to have, either on a conscious or subconscious level? So keep it small or big. It doesn't really make a difference. The only difference it makes is the way it challenges your belief system. So these could become the next version of the BEM experiment, where our experimental hypothesis is, can focused attention and strong belief in a desired outcome help bring it about in everyday life? So there you have it. You can be a participant in my study if you wish. In fact, you already are. I'll kick this off by intending to achieve 20,000 visualizations in 6 months' time. So you can check for yourself whether my intention is materialized. And I think this is it for the experiment. So thank you for watching. Thank you for taking part. And if you have found this content interesting, please hit the subscribe button so you can be notified of my future videos, and like it if you wish, which will help more people access this content, or don't. Either way, you have been part of my experiment. Nothing happens by chance in life. Or does it? The answer is up to you. Have a wonderful awakened day.